Hello people, and welcome to Crypto Exposed. Ripple partners with South Korea's BDAX to launch institutional grade custody for XRP and RLUSD. Nice. Okay guys, let's get into it. So, it's coming guys, it's coming. As I've been saying, everything is moving very fast now, and I think the fact that you've got a president in the US who is being pro-crypto, I do think this is very much expediting a lot of the process of crypto now getting into the mainstream, getting adopted at a much faster pace. Everything is moving so much faster. If you just think back to obviously the Gary Gensler regime of the SEC and the lawsuits that was going on, no regulatory framework, all these things that were pushing back, the innovation of crypto, right? And just stifling the opportunity for crypto to try and thrive. Well, now you're getting the complete opposite of that. Things are coming out very clearly, they're trying to get regulations done within months, which just shows, whether they'll get it done in months or not, but it just shows that Gary Gensler had 4 years and provided no regulations. But yet we've now got a pro-crypto president and they're trying to get it done within months. So, even if they don't get it done within months, let's just say even at worst, a year. You can see the difference, right? You can see exactly what Gary Gensler was trying to do. And this exposes just how shady he was. So good riddance to him, but let's move on. But yes, guys, we now have Ripple partnering with South Korea's BDAX. So BDAX is a digital custody asset firm. And they're offering now custody services using Ripple's custody services. I think this is the future, guys, as I've said before. This is where now, for the people who are thinking, okay, is there any chance that we might be able to, get a yield for holding XRP, that kind of thing. This is the kind of thing that you'd be hoping for, because it's very possible that banks will also want to use this. It's a way for banks to use it without having to then get their hands too deep into crypto if they don't fully understand it or they're not yet prepared for it. And, Ripple is, I've said it before, one of the biggest crypto companies out there, bar none, right? So they know that this company is going to have everything, at bay, because they are a crypto based company. And so when you're someone who, might not necessarily have the full know-how yet and the full understanding to provide certain services yourself, it's very likely that you'll just partner with someone who can, right? That's the most logical step forward. And so it's very possible that the banks, when they want to get involved, they could very possibly just partner with Ripple and, the banks to incentivize you to use them and to, go with them for their custody services. They could maybe offer you a yield for holding, the crypto via that bank, so it's very possible that, in the near future that you will actually see banks trying to incentivize you to basically store your XRP with them, store your XRP with their custody solutions, obviously via Ripple. And so, I don't know how quick all this is going to come, because as I say, with Trump now being a pro-crypto president, this could happen very quick. This could happen within a year. At the end of the day, I think once the clear regulations are there, I think that's what's really going to open the floodgates, because once the US start getting involved, a lot of countries will usually follow suit. I mean, you've got here, South Korea already moving on it, but South Korea have had a huge love for XRP. I don't know if you're aware of this, but South Korea have been going crazy for XRP for years now. They've been a huge driver for XRP in terms of value and, people innovating over at that country. So South Korea have always, really, really had a thing for XRP. So I'm not surprised to see that they're, already getting the ball rolling. But, with places like the UK and things like that, they're probably going to wait for the US. They're probably going to wait for the US to do this stuff first, and then they'll just follow suit, that kind of thing, because US does really lead the world in that sense, because it's, it's the biggest economy. The dollar is the world reserve currency, that kind of stuff. So they do kind of lead the pack in that regard. But, this is where, in a way, following suit is not always the best way, because, if we see what, the US have done due to, obviously, having a corrupt person in charge like Gary Gensler of the SEC, the impact that crypto could have made already had it have not been for Gary Gensler being in. And look, this is my thing, right? It's not that I'm saying, hey, get someone who's necessarily, pro crypto, but just be fair, right? Like, Gary Gensler was anti-crypto. There's a difference. Now, I'm glad we've got someone pro-crypto to balance it out. But even if we'd have had someone who was just fair and wasn't just suing people unnecessarily and using lies, right? Using lies and information that, companies were giving them in trust and hope that they would, be given the clear rules of whether they were doing things right or not to then be used against them to sue them. That's the difference. If you'd have just had someone who was fair, a lot of these lawsuits that happened, over the last 4 years wouldn't have happened, right? The Ripple lawsuit wouldn't have occurred because Ripple would go into the SEC and asking, hey, is this okay? Is everything we're doing all right? Are we doing all this by the book? And the SEC would just saying, yeah, just keep giving us information and it'll be fine. And then they sued them. So it's not that you even had to have like a pro-crypto president. Just have someone who was neutral, who was just like, hey, I'm not pro-crypto, but I'm not against it. Like, let's just see what happens. That would have been fine. But obviously, I'm happy to see a pro-crypto president because you can see how fast things can move when you actually do have a pro-crypto president in. So I'm all for it. But I'm just showing you that the hindrance that Gary Gensler has done, like the damage. And so, yeah, as I say, guys, like this is where, for the people who are, they don't want to sell their XRP because, I do hear a lot of people say they're never going to sell their XRP. They just want to wait until custody services and things like that are out, and then they'll just live off of the dividends that they'll get from custody services. Look, I don't know how much banks are going to offer, people to custody their XRP. So we'll have to see. But yeah, like this is definitely something that you could do. You could like leave it with a bank. Now, the thing that I will just say with this, there's pros and cons, right? Because the one thing I will say, if you let a bank custody, your XRP, you need to make sure that it's protected in case anything should happen, right? If like there's a banking collapse or anything like that, because, what they might do is they might say, okay, what is the XRP worth at the time of the collapse? And then rather than giving you that much worth of XRP, they will just give you that much money. And obviously, I don't know about you, but I'm not someone who wants the monetary value. I want the XRP. So the one thing I will say is any of you guys looking into this, make sure you've got clear stipulations of how it works. Because for me, if they say, look, we'll give you the monetary value of XRP, of what it's worth at the time, I'm not interested because that's not what I want. I want exactly the XRP. I'd rather you give me the actual, the amount of XRP that I had rather than basically just giving me a monetary value. Because, this happened before, right? I was watching this documentary and it was about an exchange that got hacked. And, basically, the people got away with some of the money. They didn't spend all of it, but they spent a good chunk of it, right? And so they did manage to retrieve some of the Bitcoin back because it was Bitcoin that was essentially stolen. But basically, what the exchange did at the time was they said, oh, well, look, all we can do is give you the value amount of what the Bitcoin would have been worth at that time. And this is like months to a year later that they're doing this, right? And so obviously the person's like, well, I never intended to sell at that point. And so what they've given them at that time, had they have kept it even up until that year, it would have been worth substantially more. So they're saying, well, that's not really fair because, I had no intention to sell, but that was just what they agreed to. And this is the thing where you have got to be careful. And this is why some people don't want to do custody, right? And I do understand that some people are like, the whole point of crypto is to not have to go with the banks and things like that and institutions. I get it. That's completely up to you. As I say, there are other places that can offer you yields, but again, it's whether you feel comfortable, right? Do you feel safe, with any company custodying your crypto or anything like that? That's obviously your decision to make. But yeah, like there are obviously other alternatives, or you could just not do the custody thing if you'd rather just manage your XRP. But then obviously you got to understand that you're probably not going to get any kind of yield just for holding it in a cold wallet, right? A cold storage wallet. The other thing I will say is like, if you think about banks these days, when they offer out like savings accounts and stuff like that, they offer usually a very poor yield, like these days savings accounts, they're not even worth, they're not even worth putting the money into, because the interest that you get is so low. It's just ridiculous. So I don't know, because crypto's so new, and because like the volatility is still so high, maybe they will offer bigger yields at the beginning and start to tone it down further down the line as crypto becomes more mainstream and more adopted. But I just know that, if you look at what, for example, interest you would get like, say, 10, 15 years ago in a savings account compared to now, you'll see that it's dwindled dramatically. So whether they're going to give you a really great offer, I don't know. But the one thing I will say is, obviously, the likelihood of banks collapsing, depending on what type of banks you're talking about, it's unlikely with some. There's a lot of banks out there that are like too big to fail, as they say. So, it would like crush the economy if they were to go down. So there are that level of like, some banks you can probably feel very comfortable in thinking this bank isn't going to go anywhere. And so you will feel that it's safe. So yeah, that's obviously another thought that you can have. But guys, like I say, the simple thing is, this is where the future is. It is going to be a point where you will be able to gain interest just for holding XRP with certain institutions. This is actually institutions coming in. This is the beginning of it. And there's going to be plenty more to come, right? Like, yes, it started here now in South Korea. They've got the ball rolling, but it's going to happen in America. It's going to happen in the UK. It's going to happen worldwide. It's coming. So get used to it. And, if this is something that you are interested in, start doing your research, because this is something that, it is something that you could end up getting quite a decent amount of money from, right? Very, very possible. So it's something that's definitely worth you guys checking into if you're interested. But yeah, this is definitely great stuff to see, because we're starting to see the future being rolled out. Thank you very much for watching this. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And hit that bell. Take care.